Hi viewers, guest with Nazir. Today we are honored. Today's personality is a writer, poet, broadcaster, and many things. We'll discuss about his personality, and especially we are focusing today on literature. Our guest is Basir Kazmi. Welcome in our show.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
Basir, please tell about your childhood and your early days of your life.
Right. Well, as I usually say, that I was born with a poetic spoon in my mouth. So my father was a poet, Basir Kazmi, very well known. And when I became aware of myself, I could see writers and poets around me, and that was the atmosphere where people, friends of my father, and that they would talk about literature, art, painting, music. So that was the atmosphere where I opened my eyes, and then of course I followed what every child does: school, primary school, then high school, and then college, and so on and so forth.
So which city you was born?
Lahore. It was Lahore, and I was, it was again a sort of privilege that I got good schools and good college, later on Government College Lahore, where I studied, and became the editor of the magazine eventually when I was in the final year. And I also contested the Students' Union election, and Mr. Zulfikar Ali Bhutto was the president at that time, and with a delegation of students I met him as well a couple of times. So those were the times.
So we have talked about the former Prime Minister, a great Prime Minister, Zulfikar Ali Bhutto. So how you narrate him in few words, if you want to say about his personality?
He was very intelligent, very sharp memory. I mean, he could remember people that whom he had met years ago in a crowd. So because one of our friends asked him to recognize him, and he did. I can name him. He's a very famous politician at the moment. So
I see.
Yeah. So we were surprised that Mr. Bhutto could remember. We thought he would say, "Well, I meet thousands of people. How would I remember you?" But he just concentrated, and he spotted him, and he said, "Oh, well, there and that." So very impressive personality. Very, very charismatic.
So when we talk about the literature, so literature has no boundaries.
Yeah.
So you have read English literature, you have read Urdu poetry, literature, and yourself is as a poet. How you see that literature can affect the society itself?
Literature brings about a change or changes in us, within ourselves, very gradually. For example, if I read Hardy and Schopenhauer, so a sort of pessimism develops in me, and gradually I start believing in chance and fate, the role of chance and fate, and as decisive factors. Although they are great, Hardy, I am his admirer, and his descriptions and the atmosphere, the environment he paints, and the characters he develops, fascinating. But gradually, if you read Shakespeare, for example, and again, his tragedies are the most impressive pieces that he wrote. But at the end, we get some hope that the tragic hero fell from good fortune because of some mistake, some sort of error, some what is called flaw in the personality that developed somehow or was inherent. So this is how literature changes people. The curriculum is the most effective thing, because a lot of people, students at that age, impressionable age, they go through the same thing. So that's why the educationists, they stress that we should pay special attention to developing curriculum, because it changes, it builds the lives. So, but it's a very long process. And of course, that's why and it is recommended that we read different authors, different philosophies, and so yes, literature, and because it affects everybody, and it involves everybody, so you don't have to qualify to enjoy and learn from literature.
Subcontinent is very fertile with the talent about the literature, writers, poets. So who has inspired you?
Well, as poets, I mean, if we mention poets, so starting from Wali Dakhani and Mir Taqi Mir and then Nazir Akbar Abadi, Ghalib, Daag, and then of course Iqbal. So everybody.
And if we come to your subject, so what subject is much more near to your heart when you write about any reflection or any poetry?
Oh, well, I am gradually, in fact, I started writing love poetry and objects of nature, flowers and moon and so clouds. But gradually, when of course I grew up and I saw the problems, social issues, and I read Bernard Shaw and Ibsen, and how they tackled the social issues and made debate a part of their literature, their plays. They were the first people who did. So gradually, social issues and values of the society, then they attracted me more, and then of course the modern life, busy life. And when I moved to England in 1990, so here life was different in some ways. Well, life is the same everywhere. It has been. There are certain things that never change, but here again, time factor, punctuality, and long working hours, and then household chores. You have to do everything yourself, you don't get any help. So these things, how they affect your life, your personality, so they became...
How you find this journey as a broadcaster, as a journalist, as a poet, as a writer, and then at the end as a teacher?
In fact, as a broadcaster, it was a very short period when I was a student, and then any year after that, Manchester University, a mature student. BBC, it was the Asian program, Jankar, that I was asked to write news review, weekly review, and recite the news as well. And my wife did the same. And there were a couple of other Indian friends who did that. So that was a weekly program, a couple of hours. But that gave us a very good experience. And in Pakistan years ago, I used to participate in radio programs and TV programs. So as a broadcaster, of course, I can't say that I have a lot of experience. And as a journalist, again, recently, in the past couple of years, I have written some articles, about 15, 20 articles for an electronic newspaper. So as far as the writing is concerned, as a journalist, that is all. Previously, I would write some articles, occasional here and there. So, but I don't think, I never thought of myself as a journalist or a broadcaster, because I know what the broadcasters and the journalists do, and it's their life, total, 24 hours, their passion.
What do you think about the social media?
It's very effective, but scary as well.
Yes.
It is scary. I mean, you are all the time on your toes. You keep wondering whether when something is going to appear about you or I mean, you may not be known, you may not be a famous person, but again, still you keep, because it's open, and everybody is famous, everybody is known. Just one comment about somebody can disturb or please
change the whole world.
Yeah.
So we're coming back to United Kingdom. When we compare the two literature, Urdu and English, so what similarities you have found in it? And if we will say we want to grow up the future poets and future writers, what are your tips for them?
Right. I think because modern Urdu literature, 20th century literature, almost all, it has been influenced by English literature in particular, and the Western literature that was read in translations in English. So there are quite a few. It's not different, very different, because of course when something influences something, the influenced things becomes similar in some ways. And right, because in Urdu, for example, in poetry, we have the institution of mushaira, reciting poetry in front of an audience which could be as big as a few thousands. And my English poets, poet friends, they are surprised, and when I told them, they were surprised. And then I took them to mushaira, and a couple of them went to Pakistan and India and I went with them into India, and when they saw the actual mushaira, they were surprised. But here the reading is different. A poet recites his or her poem, and at the end the audience applauds, and then that's. But this wah-wah thing in mushaira and the interaction with the
so
audience,
applause and clapping.
so they thought, why are they, as if they were interfering with the recitation. So mushaira and this interaction with the general audience makes Urdu poetry slightly different as well. So inspiration is coming from the audience sometimes.
But I've seen the translation of your poetry. It is very inspiring when we'll talk about any reader of English literature, especially your poem about the branch which become the pen.
Right.
So how it has inspired, when a branch converted into a pen, and pen can spread the light and the knowledge.
Right. The thing is, because this is a very, very old subject, pen and ink, and of course, I, of course, thought of it it just occurred to me in a slightly different way. But when it was translated, because the tradition of pen and ink was very familiar in the English Western world, so my co-translator, Simon Fletcher, didn't have any problem with that. In fact, when Debjani Chatterjee, who lives in Sheffield, she's from Sheffield, and she was also awarded MBE years ago. And we formed, in fact, Simon Fletcher, who lives in Shrewsbury, and Debjani and myself, 20 years ago, we formed a group, Mini Mushaira. So we recited poetry up and down the country and even abroad. We went to Norway as well, India and Pakistan. So we thought that we should be seen together as a collaboration between different communities. So we used literature to bring communities together as well. We translated each other's work. I translated their poems into Urdu. And now, Debjani and Simon, I learned a lot from that, through that process of translation. Because they said that a piece of translation should stand on its own. It should be accepted as a piece of poetry by the English readers. It should just not merely communicate the content or the meanings of the poem, but after the content is known to the reader, they should be able to appreciate it as a piece of poetry. So I couldn't have done that because I haven't written poetry in English. So we discovered that it should be a collaborative effort. So in their collaboration, I have translated a lot of poems.
I think that if we'll talk about the literature, especially when talking about two literature, English and Urdu, it's a big ocean, and we can only pick up few drops.
Yeah.
So anything which has been done recently in universities here in the United Kingdom or in Pakistan about the poetry of your father?
Yes, in Pakistan, a few dissertations and theses have been written about his work. The first was written in 1975, and I think 2 or 3 PhD theses were written in India and 2 or 3 in Pakistan. So universities have, and still there are a couple of research works that are being done.
I wish we can play a ghazal, very famous ghazal, which is my favorite, sung by Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan, late Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan. Gham hai ya khushi hai tu, meri zindagi hai tu.
Sure.
So, if for our audience and for our viewers, so what is the translation? If we'll say just first few lines of that ghazal, Gham hai ya khushi hai tu, meri zindagi hai tu, just for our audience.
Yeah, I mean, offhand, I could say that Gham hai ya khushi hai tu, whether you are my grief, a source of grief for me, or happiness, meri zindagi hai tu, you are my life.
And the source of inspiration is yourself.
Yeah. Whether it's happiness, or grief or pain, this is what it is. And so the poet accepts and in fact cherishes this, that grief coming from you is life.
And Basir, what is your message for our viewers who are watching us all over the world?
Message? Well, try to live peaceful, content life, develop a habit of the habit of reading, and choose what you want to read. Start a book. If you don't like it, pick another one. And don't just restrict yourself to one genre like poetry. Read fiction, poetry, plays. Then enjoy other forms of art like music, painting, theatre, and try to be creative in everyday life. And the routine life is a blessing. Don't undervalue it. It's a very valuable thing. If your routine is maintained, what you do without any suffering, that's a blessing.
Thank you very much. So it's a time. So what we will do, we will continue this episode, but in part 2, we will discuss with Basir about his dad and his life and achievements. Keep watching Sheffield Live.